The warning sirens aboard the Defiant blared as Captain James Miller stared at the tactical display. Red dots representing Dominion warships filled the screen, while the blue markers for human vessels winked out one by one. His hands gripped the command chair tighter with each lost signal. The bridge crew worked in tense silence, broken only by the soft beeping of their instruments and quiet reports of more ships lost. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Guardian fleet," Lieutenant Cooper said, his voice trembling slightly. "The Mars Defense Command, it's gone too." He pulled off his headset and looked at Miller with wide eyes. "Captain, we're picking up surrender broadcasts from Earth. The Dominion, they're everywhere." Miller closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of those words sink in. When he opened them again, his jaw was set firm. "Status of our experimental stealth system?" he asked, turning to Engineer Thompson. "Operating at full capacity, sir," Thompson replied from his station. "They haven't spotted us yet. The energy mask is holding." The engineer's fingers danced across his console, making constant adjustments to maintain their invisibility. First Officer West moved to stand beside Miller's chair. "James," she said quietly, using his first name for the first time in years, "we might be all that's left. What are your orders?" Miller looked around the bridge at his crew of 150 men and women, some he'd served with for over a decade. They were more than just crew now. They were family. And they might be humanity's last free warriors. "The Dominion thinks they've won," Miller said, standing up. "They expect us to bow down, to surrender like everyone else." He walked to the main viewport, watching as distant flashes marked the end of another human fleet. "But they don't know humans very well, do they?" He turned back to face his crew. "We have advantages they don't know about. This ship was built for exactly this kind of situation, to operate alone, behind enemy lines. We have the most advanced stealth technology ever developed. We have a crew that's trained together for years. And most importantly," he allowed himself a small smile, "they think they've already won. That makes them vulnerable." "Sir," West said, pulling up a tactical display, "even with our advantages, we're just one ship against an empire that spans half the galaxy." "The odds." "The odds don't matter," Miller interrupted. "What matters is that we're still here. What matters is that as long as one human ship remains free, Earth isn't truly conquered." He walked back to his chair and sat down. "We're going to fight back. Not with brute force. We'll be smarter than that. We'll hit them where they don't expect us. We'll gather intelligence. We'll find their weaknesses, and we'll show them why you should never, ever corner a human." The bridge crew straightened in their seats. Hope began to replace the despair in their eyes. They were trained for this, to operate independently, to think on their feet, to survive against overwhelming odds. "Thompson," Miller called out, "plot a course to the Arcturus sector. There's a small Dominion supply post there. Should be lightly defended. That's where we start." He looked at his tactical officer. "Lieutenant Reed, begin analyzing their patrol patterns. I want to know every gap in their coverage." "Aye, sir," came the responses, crisp and professional. As the Defiant's engines hummed to life, Miller felt a fierce pride in his crew. They'd lost everything, their homes, their families, maybe even Earth itself. But they hadn't lost their spirit. The Dominion thought they'd crushed humanity's will to fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The stealth cruiser slipped away from the battle zone, invisible to the Dominion sensors. Behind them, the Empire's warships continued their victory celebration, unaware that their greatest nightmare was already plotting its first strike. The human race wasn't finished. In fact, this was just the beginning. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. The Dominion supply post disappeared in a ball of fire, leaving nothing but scattered debris. The Defiant was already gone, slipping away under its energy mask before the first alarm could sound. It was their third successful strike this week. On the bridge of his flagship, Grand Admiral Vex crushed a data pad in his four-fingered hand. Another attack, another failure to catch the Phantom ship. His pale gray skin had taken on a darker shade of anger as he watched the replay of the supply post's destruction. "Find them," he growled at his command staff. "I want that ship found." But the Defiant was already far away, hidden in the dust clouds of a nearby nebula. Inside the ship's briefing room, Captain Miller and his officers studied the data from their latest raid. Their shields dropped too easily, Engineer Thompson said, pointing to the sensor readings. "Look at the power curve. There's something wrong with their design." Miller leaned forward, interested. "Explain." "Their shield generators all pulse at the same frequency. Hit them with the right energy signature," and Thompson snapped his fingers. "The whole system crashes." First Officer West smiled. "A fatal flaw in their defensive systems. This could change everything." The ship's communicator beeped. "Captain," Lieutenant Cooper called from the bridge. "You need to see this. We're picking up civilian transmissions. The locals are calling us the human ghost." The crew gathered around the main screen, watching as alien news networks buzzed with stories of the mysterious ship that struck without warning and vanished without a trace. Some called them heroes. Others called them myths. The Dominion called them terrorists. "They're scared," Miller said, watching the reports. "Not just angry anymore. Scared." The Defiant's success was spreading hope across the conquered systems. Small acts of rebellion were breaking out. Cargo ships were going missing. Information was leaking. The perfect order of the Dominion was showing its first cracks. Back on his flagship, Vex ordered another officer executed for failing to catch the human vessel. His crew worked in terrified silence, knowing any failure could mean death. But their fear made them clumsy, and clumsy soldiers made mistakes. "Sir," West said, studying new intelligence reports, "Vex is getting desperate. He's doubled patrols, but he's spreading his forces thin, creating gaps in their defense network." Miller nodded. "And we'll use those gaps. But we need to think bigger." He pulled up a map of Dominion space. "Their supply lines are vulnerable. Their commanders are scared. Their people are watching their perfect empire fail to catch one human ship." Thompson spoke up from his station. "The shield flaw. If we can find a way to broadcast the frequency weakness to other resistance groups, then any ship with basic weapons could take down a Dominion cruiser," West finished. "We could arm the entire underground." The Defiant's crew worked through the night, preparing detailed technical data for transmission. They coded the messages carefully, hiding them in normal commercial broadcasts. Slowly, the information spread. 3 days later, a Dominion patrol ship was destroyed by what looked like a simple merchant vessel. 2 days after that, another patrol disappeared. The attacks were small, scattered, seemingly random. But they all used the same method. Vex knew something had changed. He ordered increased security, more executions, harsher punishments for any sign of rebellion. But he couldn't execute every merchant, punish every world. The more he tightened his grip, the more systems slipped through his fingers. In the safety of deep space, Miller watched the reports coming in. "Send a message to our new friends," he told Cooper. "Tell them Phase 1 is complete. Time to start Phase 2. The Defiant vanished into the darkness of space, leaving chaos in its wake. One ship had become many. One act of defiance had become a movement. And somewhere in the vast empire, Grand Admiral Vex stared at the stars, wondering where the ghost ship would strike next. The merchant ship looked ordinary enough. Just another cargo vessel moving between stars, carrying food and supplies. But when it passed the Defiant in deep space, it transmitted a data burst that Lieutenant Cooper quickly decoded. 6 Dominion warships moving through Sector 4, Cooper read. A new command center being built in the Proxima system. And he paused, double-checking the data. A list of 20 other ships ready to join our cause. Miller nodded. Their network was growing. What had started with a few brave merchant captains had grown into a web of information spanning dozens of systems. Every trader, every transport, every mining ship could be their eyes and ears. "The Dominion doesn't understand," West said, reviewing the intelligence reports. They're so used to ruling through fear that they can't see how it's backfiring. Every cruel act creates more allies for us. Thompson looked up from his engineering station. Speaking of allies, that last group we trained is ready. They've already modified their ships with the shield-breaking technology. The training sessions were risky. The Defiant had to drop its stealth to let other ships dock, making them vulnerable. But the reward was worth it. Each ship they trained became a new weapon against the Empire. A warning light flashed on Cooper's console. Captain, emergency transmission from one of our contacts. A Dominion fleet is attacking a civilian habitat in Sector 7. They're making an example of someone who helped us. Miller's jaw tightened. How many ships? 3 cruisers, sir. Plot an intercept course. It's time to test our theory about their shield network. The Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light speed near the habitat, still hidden under its energy mask. The Dominion cruisers were in a standard attack formation, their weapons charging to fire on the defenseless station. Send the signal to our allies in the area, Miller ordered. Let's see how the Dominion handles fighting enemies they can't see. 4 merchant ships suddenly dropped their disguises, revealing hidden weapon ports. They appeared from different directions, each one broadcasting the exact frequency that would disrupt Dominion shields. The battle was short but fierce. The Dominion ships, unable to coordinate against attacks from multiple directions, fell one by one. Their shields collapsed under the precisely targeted strikes. When the last cruiser exploded, a cheer went up from the habitat's residents. Message incoming from the habitat, Cooper announced. They're asking how they can join the resistance. Miller smiled. Tell them we'll be in touch. But first, he turned to West. What did we learn about their command structure from this attack? West was already analyzing the data. The cruisers waited for orders before returning fire. Every decision came from their command ship. Their whole fleet operates that way. Central control, no individual initiative. Another weakness, Thompson added. Their entire military depends on a chain of command. Break the chain, and the whole thing falls apart. Miller finished. Cooper, send word to all our allies. Tell them to start mapping every command center, every communication relay. We need to understand exactly how their control system works. The Defiant moved away from the battle site, vanishing once again into the vast darkness of space. Behind them, the habitat's residents were already spreading the word about what they'd seen. The story would grow with each telling. How the human ghost had come to their rescue. How the mighty Dominion ships had fallen. In his private quarters, Miller recorded a log entry. Day 89 since Earth fell. We're no longer alone in this fight. Every system the Dominion crushed, every race they enslaved. They're all waiting for a chance to fight back. We're giving them that chance, and we're teaching them something the Dominion never understood. He paused, looking at a picture of Earth on his wall. We're teaching them that the strongest weapon isn't fear, it's hope. Somewhere in the Empire, thousands of beings were quietly preparing for their moment. The rebellion was no longer just one ship. It was becoming an army, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the signal to strike. Grand Admiral Vex stood over the body of his fleet commander, his weapon still hot in his hand. The other officers in the room stood frozen, trying not to draw his attention. Would anyone else like to explain why a group of merchant ships destroyed 3 of my cruisers? His voice was quiet, which made it even more terrifying. No one spoke. Leave me, all of you. As his staff hurried out, Vex watched the replay of the battle again. Something about the attacks was familiar. The precision, the timing. It reminded him of the human ghost. But that was impossible. One ship couldn't be in so many places. On the bridge of the Defiant, Miller and his crew watched a very different kind of video. They had intercepted broadcasts from deep within Dominion space, recordings of their leaders brutally punishing their own people. Send copies to every world in the Empire, Miller ordered. Let everyone see how their rulers treat failure. Cooper worked at his station, breaking into communication networks across dozens of systems. Sir, Our allies report growing unrest on at least 15 worlds. The Dominion's grip is weakening. Their own actions are destroying them, West said, reviewing more reports. Every officer Vex executes, every world they punish, it all feeds the rebellion. Thompson entered the bridge, excitement clear on his face. Captain, you need to see this. Our sensors picked up something strange during the last attack. He pulled up a detailed scan of the destroyed Dominion ships. Their power systems are all connected somehow. It's like they're drawing energy from a single source. That's impossible, West said, leaning closer to look at the data. The power requirements would be massive, Thompson finished. But that's exactly what we're seeing. Somehow, they're channeling energy across light years of space. Before they could discuss it further, alarms blared through the ship. Multiple Dominion vessels approaching. Cooper called out. They're using a new search pattern. Evasive action, Miller ordered, but something was different this time. The Dominion ships were closing in from all directions, using the Defiant's own tactics against them. They're learning, West whispered. The next few minutes were tense as the Defiant maneuvered through the tightening net. Thompson pushed the stealth systems beyond their safe limits, while Cooper searched desperately for a gap in the enemy formation. Finally, they slipped through, leaving the frustrated Dominion fleet behind. But it had been close, too close. They're getting better, Miller said once they were safe. But so are we. He turned to Thompson. This power source you found, could it be their weakness? If we can find it, Thompson replied. But sir, the amount of energy we're talking about, it would have to be something ancient, something far beyond current technology. Sir, Cooper's voice was urgent. New reports coming in. Vex has ordered the destruction of any ship that fails to provide proper identification immediately. Merchant vessels, passenger ships, doesn't matter. The crew fell silent. Such an order would bring trade to a standstill across the Empire. Millions would suffer. He's losing control, West said quietly. These are the actions of someone who knows he's failing. Miller stood, looking at each member of his crew. Then we push harder. Cooper, tell our network to spread the word. Any ship that wants to avoid Dominion patrols can follow our new navigation routes. West, coordinate with the resistance cells. I want attacks on every supply line using those routes. Thompson, find that power source. Thompson nodded. Already on it, sir. As the crew moved to their tasks, Miller watched the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, Vex was growing more desperate, more dangerous. The Empire was starting to crack, but like any wounded predator, it was at its most deadly when cornered. The real war was just beginning, and the next battle would determine whether the human ghost remained a phantom of hope or became just another forgotten rebel crushed by the Empire. The ruins floated in space like broken teeth, remnants of a civilization that vanished millions of years ago. The Defiant moved carefully between the massive structures, its sensors recording everything. They had found this place thanks to Thompson's relentless tracking of energy signatures. These readings don't make sense, Thompson said, staring at his console. The power output is enormous, but I can't find a source. It's like the energy is coming from everywhere. Miller watched as his crew worked to understand what they had discovered. The ruins seemed to pulse with a faint blue light, barely visible to the naked eye. Whatever powered these ancient structures was still active after millions of years. Captain, Cooper called from his station. I'm picking up Dominion transmissions. A lot of them. They're all being routed through this location. West moved to look at his readings. It's not just communications, power signatures, weapon systems, shield frequencies. Everything leads back here. Thompson suddenly straightened in his chair. That's it. Captain, I understand now. These aren't just ruins. They're a network hub. The ancients built a system of quantum-linked reactors. The Dominion didn't create their empire's technology. They found it and took it. Miller leaned forward. Explain it simply. Imagine a web. Thompson said, drawing in the air with his hands. Every Dominion ship, every weapon, every shield, they're all connected to these reactors through quantum entanglement. That's how they can transmit power across light years. That's why their ships all use the same shield frequency. They're all drawing from the same source. A sudden alarm cut through the excitement. Dominion patrol approaching, Cooper warned. 3 minutes until they're in range. Hide in the ruins, Miller ordered. The Defiant slipped between two massive structures, its stealth systems blending with the ancient metal. They watched as 3 Dominion cruisers passed by, obviously following a regular patrol route. They're protecting it, West said softly. This is their heart. Without these reactors, their entire empire would lose power, Thompson finished. Ships, weapons, communications, everything would shut down. Miller studied the ruins with new understanding. Can you find the control center? Thompson worked his sensors, scanning each structure carefully. There, he pointed to a central building larger than the others. That's where the quantum links are managed. But sir, if we destroy it, we won't just hurt the Dominion. Every world, depending on their power grid, will go dark. The weight of that knowledge settled over the bridge. They had found the Empire's weakness, but using it would affect millions of innocent lives. Cooper, Miller said after a long moment, send a message to every resistance cell. Tell them to start stockpiling emergency power supplies. Tell them to prepare their people for darkness. He turned to West. How long do we need to get supplies to every world? She calculated quickly. At least 2 weeks, maybe 3. They'll spot increased activity, Thompson warned. Vex will know something's coming. Miller nodded. Then we give him something else to worry about. West, plan a series of attacks. Hit them harder than ever before, but stay away from this sector. Make Vex think we're focused somewhere else. The crew moved with new purpose, each understanding what their discovery meant. They had found both the source of the Dominion's power and their greatest weakness. Now they just needed time to make sure the cure wasn't worse than the disease. As the Defiant prepared to leave, Miller took one last look at the ancient ruins. Somewhere in the Empire's past, another civilization had reached for the stars. They had built something incredible, something that had lasted millions of years. And now, that same power would be used to free the galaxy from tyranny. Send one more message, he told Cooper, to every resistance cell. Tell them, the darkness is coming. But after darkness comes dawn. The cargo ship's transformation was amazing to watch. Hidden panels slid away, revealing weapon ports. Shields that had been disguised as ordinary hull plating hummed to life. In less than 5 minutes, the simple transport had become a warship. Impressive, Miller said to the ship's captain, an alien named Crow, whose blue scales shimmered under the hangar lights. They stood in a secret dock, hidden inside an asteroid, watching as more ships underwent similar changes. We've been preparing for years, Crow said, waiting for a chance. But we needed something to unite us. We needed the human ghost. The Defiant had spent the last week gathering their allies. Ships from a dozen different species filled the hidden base. Each one had been secretly modified, turned from peaceful trader to warrior. Lieutenant Cooper's report, Sir, West said, handing Miller a datapad. Emergency supplies have reached 80% of the targeted worlds. Power generators, food, medical supplies, everything they'll need when the grid goes down. Miller nodded, watching as Thompson moved among the alien ships, teaching their engineers about Dominion shield frequencies and power systems. The knowledge they had gained was spreading, preparing for the final battle. The Dominion's getting suspicious, Cooper's voice came through Miller's communicator. Their patrols have doubled in 3 sectors. And Vex, he's executing officers daily now. Let him, Miller replied. Every act of cruelty just sends more allies our way. He turned to West. How many ships do we have now? 328, she answered. All converted, all trained, plus resistance cells on 47 worlds, are ready to strike when we give the signal. A small ship appeared at the asteroid base's entrance, flashing the correct codes. Inside was another ally. This one a former Dominion scientist who had fled rather than face Vex's growing madness. The quantum network has a safety protocol, the scientist told them in a briefing room packed with ship captains. If too many systems draw power at once, it starts an emergency shutdown. The ancients built it to prevent overload. Thompson leaned forward. So if we attacked with enough ships, all drawing power, the network would detect the strain and begin shutdown procedures, the scientist finished. But you'd need to coordinate perfectly. One mistake, and the safety systems will isolate the threat. Miller looked around the room at the gathered captains. Former enemies now sat together, united by a common cause. They had all suffered under the Dominion. They had all waited for this chance. We'll need a distraction, West said. Something big enough to draw their forces away from the ancient ruins. Crow stood up. My people can help with that. We know ways to trigger solar flares. Give us 5 suns, and we'll give you a light show the Dominion can't ignore. Plans were made, roles assigned. Each ship would have its part to play. They had one chance to get this right, one chance to free the galaxy. As the meeting ended, Miller walked through the hangar one last time. Engineers from different species worked together, sharing knowledge that had been hoarded for generations. Pilots practiced formation flying, learning to work as one fleet. It's more than just a rebellion now, West said, walking beside him. It's an alliance, maybe the first real one this galaxy has seen in centuries. Miller watched as a group of aliens practiced human combat maneuvers, learning to fight in ways the Dominion had never seen. The Empire thought they could rule through fear and division. They never understood the power of unity. Cooper's voice came over the comm again. Sir, our last supply ships are in position. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Miller looked at the fleet one last time. Hundreds of ships that had hidden their true nature, just like the Defiant. Soon, they would all reveal themselves together. Send the signal, he ordered. Tell all ships. Operation Dawn begins in 24 hours. The nebula glowed purple and red around the Defiant, its gases swirling in strange patterns. To most ships, it would be beautiful but deadly. The energy discharges could fry sensitive equipment, but the Defiant's advanced shields held firm. Dominion fleet approaching, Cooper announced. 15 ships. No, 20. Grand Admiral Vex is leading them personally. Miller allowed himself a small smile. The trap was working perfectly. For 3 days, they had let their location leak through seemingly secure channels. Vex's spies had done exactly what they expected, reporting the human ghost's hiding place. They're launching fighters, West reported. Standard search pattern. They think we're running out of places to hide. The Dominion ships moved carefully through the nebula, their formation tight and disciplined. On his flagship, Vex watched the tactical display with hungry eyes. After months of humiliation, he finally had the Phantom ship cornered. Sir, Thompson said quietly, our allies report they're in position, waiting for your signal. Miller nodded but didn't respond. Even inside their own ship, they had to be careful. Vex had brought enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. One mistake now would ruin everything. The first Dominion scan passed over them, the energy mask holding firm. The second scan came closer. By the third, West was gripping her console tightly. They're trying new frequencies, she warned. The mask won't hold much longer. Miller pressed a button on his chair, sending a coded burst transmission. Somewhere in 5 different star systems, Crow's ships activated their solar flare devices. The distraction was beginning. Admiral, one of Vex's officers shouted. Multiple emergency signals. Solar storms are threatening populated systems. They're requesting immediate assistance. Vex didn't look away from the nebula. Let them burn, he growled. The human ghost is here. I can feel it. The 4th scan hit the Defiant like a hammer. Warning lights flashed across Thompson's board. Mask failing. They'll see us in 10 seconds. Right on schedule, Miller said calmly. "Send the second signal." Cooper's hands flew across his console, broadcasting a new code. Across the nebula, space itself seemed to shimmer. 300 ships appeared from nowhere, their own stealth systems dropping. The trap had been reversed. Impossible. Vex screamed as his tactical display filled with enemy ships. Vessels he had dismissed as simple merchants now bristled with weapons. Species that had been enemies for generations now flew together in perfect formation. "All ships, attack pattern Delta," Miller ordered. The Allied fleet moved as one, surrounding the Dominion forces. Each ship broadcast the exact shield-breaking frequency they had learned from the Defiant. The battle was fierce but brief. Dominion ships, their shields useless, fell one by one to concentrated fire. Vex's perfectly ordered formation broke apart as captains panicked, trying to flee in different directions. "Admiral," Vex's second-in-command pleaded, "we must retreat. We can't fight them all." But Vex stood frozen, watching his fleet die around him. Everything he had built, all his careful plans, were falling apart. The Defiant moved through the chaos like a predator, its weapons finding weak points in Dominion ship designs that Thompson had spent months studying. Each shot was precise, calculated, decisive. "Vex's flagship is trying to escape," West reported. "Should we pursue?" Miller shook his head. "Let him run. Let him tell the Empire what he saw here. Let them know that the galaxy is rising against them." As the last Dominion ships fled or fell, cheers erupted across the Allied fleet. Species that had never worked together had just won their first major victory. "Send word to all resistance cells," Miller ordered. "Tell them Phase 1 is complete. Now the real battle begins." The Allied fleet formed up around the Defiant, ready to begin their assault on the quantum network. The human ghost was no longer alone. Now it led an army. The ancient ruins looked different now. Dominion warships surrounded them like angry wasps, their weapons charged. Behind them, massive defense platforms had been activated, creating a wall of death that no ship had ever broken through. "I count 200 ships," West said, studying the long-range scans, "plus the platforms. They know what we're after now." The Allied fleet hung back in the darkness of space, hidden behind a small moon. 300 ships waited for Miller's order, each one knowing this could be their last battle. "The quantum network is already showing strain," Thompson reported. "Our attacks on other sectors have forced them to divert more power to their weapons. The safety protocols are close to triggering." Miller stood at his viewport, watching the Dominion forces. Everything they had done, every battle, every raid, had led to this moment. There would be no second chances. "All ships," he said into the fleet comm, "begin Operation Dawn." The battle started with Crow's ships diving straight at the defense platforms. Their modified shields flared bright blue, absorbing impossible amounts of fire. Behind them, the rest of the fleet split into 5 groups, each one targeting a different sector of the Dominion defense. "They're responding exactly as predicted," West called out. "Vex is ordering all ships to hold position around the control center." The Defiant hung back, watching, waiting. Thompson kept his eyes glued to the power readings. "Nearly there," he muttered. "The network's almost at its limit." Dominion ships exploded as the Allies pressed their attack. But platforms were falling too, their destruction marking the space battlefield with expanding balls of fire. The cost was already high, and they weren't even close to their goal. "Sir," Cooper shouted. "New contacts. Dominion reinforcements." More enemy ships appeared from faster-than-light travel, their weapons already firing. The Allies' careful formation began to break under the assault. "Now," Miller ordered, "execute final phase." The Defiant's engines flared to full power. While the main battle raged, they shot through a gap in the defensive line that West had identified weeks ago. Behind them came 30 smaller ships, each one carrying a specially designed payload. "They've spotted us," Thompson warned. 5 ships in pursuit. "Hold course," Miller commanded. The Defiant shook as enemy fire scraped their shields. "Cooper, send the signal." Across the battlefield, every Allied ship suddenly increased power to maximum. Their weapons fired continuously. Their shields drew full energy. The quantum network screamed under the strain. "Safety protocols engaging," Thompson shouted. "The network is starting emergency shutdown." But they weren't done yet. The Defiant had to reach the control center, had to deliver their strike force. More Dominion ships turned to stop them, realizing too late what their real target was. "Shields failing," Thompson reported calmly. "Hull breach on Deck 3. "Keep going," Miller ordered. The ancient control center grew larger in their viewport. Just a few more seconds. A massive explosion rocked the Defiant. "We've lost engines," West called out. "We're not going to make it." Miller grabbed his console as the ship spun. Through the viewport, he could see their escort ships still flying true, still carrying their payloads. The Defiant had gotten them close enough. "All ships, release payloads," he ordered. 30 containers launched toward the control center. The Dominion ships ignored them, focusing their fire on the larger vessels. Their mistake. The containers exploded, releasing thousands of tiny robots, each one carrying a computer virus Thompson had designed. They swarmed the ancient structure, finding access points, infiltrating systems that had stood for millions of years. "Virus uploading," Thompson reported. "Network shutdown is accelerating." Around them, Dominion ships began to lose power. Their weapons fell silent. Their engines died. The mighty defense platforms went dark one by one. The Allies pressed their attack, targeting ships that still had emergency power. But Miller kept his eyes on the ancient control center, watching as its blue glow finally, after millions of years, began to fade. Darkness spread across the galaxy like a wave. On 1,000 worlds, Dominion ships drifted powerless in space. Their mighty weapons fell silent. Their shields vanished. Their communications died. In the command center of his last functioning base, Grand Admiral Vex watched his empire crumble. Emergency reports flooded in from every sector. Planets were rising up against their oppressors. Former slaves were taking control of powerless Dominion facilities. "Sir," his last loyal officer reported, "our forces are surrendering everywhere. Without the quantum network, we can't coordinate our response. We can't." Vex shot him without looking, but even his personal weapon flickered and died, its power source finally failing. He stood alone in the darkness, facing the end of everything he had built. On the damaged but still functioning Defiant, Miller watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The ancient ruins floated silently nearby, their blue glow completely gone. "Hull breach contained," Thompson reported from engineering. "Emergency power is holding. Unlike the Dominion, we never relied on their network." West moved to stand beside Miller's chair. Reports from all sectors confirmed total network shutdown. "The virus worked perfectly. They'll never be able to restart it." "Casualties?" Miller asked quietly. "We lost 87 ships," Cooper answered. "But their crews managed to evacuate. The Allies are picking up survivors now." He paused, listening to his communications. "Sir, they're calling for you. All of them. Every world that's breaking free wants to hear from the human ghost." Miller stood, straightening his uniform. The crew watched as he walked to Cooper's station, ready to address the galaxy. But before he could speak, a new message came in. "Captain," Cooper said urgently, "Vex's forces on Earth are surrendering. Our home, Earth, is free." A moment of silence fell over the bridge. Everything they had fought for, everything they had sacrificed, had led to this moment. Miller took a deep breath and began to speak, his words carried to every free world. "This is Captain Miller of the Earth ship Defiant. The Dominion's power is broken. Their network is gone. But our real work is just beginning." He looked at his crew, at the Allies on their view screen, at the stars that now promised freedom instead of fear. "We must rebuild. not as separate species, not as rivals, but as allies. The Dominion ruled through fear and division. We will build something better through unity and hope. Across the galaxy, cheers erupted from countless worlds. Ships from different species worked together to restore power to critical facilities. Former enemies helped each other evacuate civilians from damaged stations. "Sir," West said softly, "what about Vex?" As if in answer, new reports came in. Vex's own officers had arrested him, tired of his madness, ready to face a new reality. The mighty admiral who had terrorized the galaxy would face justice from his own people. The Defiant moved slowly through space, its battle damage visible but its spirit unbroken. Other ships fell in beside it. Merchant vessels turned warriors, former slaves now free, all flying together. "Set course for Earth," Miller ordered. "It's time to go home." As they prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Cooper received one last message. He smiled as he read it. "Sir, the Allied worlds have made a decision. They're forming a new council, with each species having an equal voice, and they want Earth to join them." Miller looked at his crew, the people who had made this possible. Thompson, who had found the Empire's weakness. West, who had planned their victories. Cooper, who had built their network of allies. And all the others who had never lost faith. "Send them our answer," he said. "Tell them Earth would be honored to join a galaxy of equals. Tell them the human ghost was just the beginning. Together, we'll build something that will last longer than any empire." The Defiant disappeared into faster-than-light speed, leading a fleet not of conquest but of cooperation. Behind them, a new age was dawning. The galaxy would remember how a single human ship had sparked a revolution. But more importantly, they would remember what came after, when former enemies became allies and hope replaced fear among the stars.